The Trials of Apollo, The Hidden Oracle by Riordan. Chapter 1. Hoodlums punch my face. I would smite them if I could. Mortality blows. My name is Apollo. I used to be a god. In my 4,612 years, I have done many things. I inflicted a plague on the Greeks who besieged Troy. I blessed Babe Ruth with 3 home runs in Game 4 of the 1926 World Series. I visited my wrath upon Britney Spears at the 2007 MTV Video Music Awards. But in all my immortal life, I never before crash-landed in a dumpster. I'm not even sure how it happened. I simply woke up falling. Skyscrapers spiraled in and out of view. Flames streamed off my body. I tried to fly. I tried to change into a cloud or teleport across the world or do 100 other things that should have been easy for me, but I just kept falling. I plunged into a narrow canyon between 2 buildings and bam! Is anything sadder than the sound of a god hitting a pile of garbage bags? I lay groaning and aching in the open dumpster. My nostrils burned with the stench of rancid salami and used diapers. My ribs felt broken, though that shouldn't have been possible. My mind stewed in confusion, but one memory floated to the surface. The voice of my father, Zeus. Your fault. Your punishment. I realized what had happened to me, and I sobbed in despair. Even for a god of poetry such as myself, it is difficult to describe how I felt. How could you, a mere mortal, possibly understand? Imagine being stripped of your clothes, then blasted with a fire hose in front of a laughing crowd. Imagine the ice-cold water filling your mouth and lungs. The pressure bruising your skin, turning your joints to putty. Imagine feeling helpless, ashamed, completely vulnerable, publicly and brutally stripped of everything that makes you you. My humiliation was worse than that. Your fault. Zeus's voice rang in my head. No, I cried miserably. No, it wasn't, please. Nobody answered. On either side of me, rusty fire escapes zigzagged up brick walls. Above, the winter sky was grey and unforgiving. I tried to remember the details of my sentencing. Had my father told me how long this punishment would last? What was I supposed to do to regain his favour? My memory was too fuzzy. I could barely recall what Zeus looked like, much less why he decided to toss me to earth. There'd been a war with the giants, I thought. The gods had been caught off guard, embarrassed, almost defeated. The only thing I knew for certain, my punishment was unfair. Zeus needed someone to blame, so of course he'd picked the handsomest, most talented, most popular god in the pantheon. Me. I lay in the garbage, staring at the label inside the dumpster lid. For pickup, call 1555 Stenchy. Zeus will reconsider, I told myself. He's just trying to scare me. Any moment he will yank me back to Olympus and let me off with a warning. Yes. My voice sounded hollow and desperate. Yes, that's it. I tried to move. I wanted to be on my feet when Zeus came to apologise. My ribs throbbed. My stomach clenched. I clawed the rim of the dumpster and managed to drag myself over the side. I toppled out and landed on my shoulder, which made a cracking sound against the tarmac. I whimpered through the pain. Stand up! Stand up! Getting to my feet was not easy. My head spun. I almost passed out from the effort. I stood in a dead-end alley. About 50 feet away, the only exit opened onto a street with grimy storefronts for a bail bondsman office and a pawn shop. I was somewhere on the west side of Manhattan, I guessed, or perhaps Crown Heights in Brooklyn. Zeus must have been really angry with me. I inspected my new body. I appeared to be a teenaged Caucasian male, clad in sneakers, blue jeans and a green polo shirt. How utterly drab. I felt sick, weak, and so human. I will never understand how you mortals tolerate it. You live your entire life trapped in a sack of meat, unable to enjoy simple pleasures like changing into a hummingbird or dissolving into pure light. And now, heavens help me, I was one of you, just another meat sack. I fumbled through my pockets, hoping I still had the keys to my sun chariot. No such luck. I found a cheap nylon wallet containing $100 in American currency. Lunch money for my first day as a mortal, perhaps, along with a New York State junior driver's license featuring a photo of a dorky, curly-haired teen who could not possibly be me, with the name Lester Papadopoulos. The cruelty of Zeus knew no bounds. I peered into the dumpster, hoping by my bow, quiver and lyre might have fallen to earth with me. I would have settled for my harmonica. There was nothing. I took a deep breath. Cheer up, I told myself. I must have retained some of my godly abilities. Matters could be worse. A raspy voice called, "Hey, Cade, take a look at this loser." Blocking the alley's exit were 2 young men, one squat and platinum blonde, the other tall and red-headed. Both wore oversized hoodies and baggy jeans. Serpentine tattoo designs covered their necks. All they were missing were the words "I'm a thug" printed in large letters across their foreheads. The redhead zeroed in on the wallet in my hand. "Now, be nice, Mikey. This guy looks friendly enough." He grinned and pulled a hunting knife from his belt. "In fact, I bet he wants to give us all his money." I blamed my disorientation for what happened next. I knew my immortality had been stripped away, but I still considered myself the mighty Apollo. One cannot change one's way of thinking as easily as one might, say, turn into a snow leopard. Also, on previous occasions when Zeus had punished me by making me mortal, yes, it had happened twice before, I had retained massive strength and at least some of my godly powers. I assumed the same would be true now. I was not going to allow two young mortal ruffians to take Lester Papadopoulos' wallet. I stood up straight, hoping Cade and Mikey would be intimidated by my regal bearing and divine beauty. Surely those qualities could not be taken from me, no matter what my driver's license photo looked like. I ignored the warm dumpster juice trickling down my neck. "I am Apollo," I announced. "You mortals have three choices. Offer me tribute, flee, or be destroyed." I wanted my words to echo through the alley, shake the towers of New York, and cause the skies to rain smoking ruin. None of that happened. On the word destroyed, my voice squeaked. The redhead Cade grinned even wider. I thought how amusing it would be if I could make the snake tattoos around his neck come alive and strangle him to death. "What do you think, Mikey?" he asked his friend. "Should we give this guy tribute?" Mikey scowled. With his bristly blonde hair, his cruel small eyes, and his thick frame, he reminded me of the monstrous sow that terrorised the village of Cromyon back in the good old days. "Not feeling the tribute, Cade?" His voice sounded like he'd been eating lit cigarettes. "What were the other options?" "Fleeing," said Cade. "Nah," said Mikey. "Being destroyed?" Mikey snorted. "How about we destroy him instead?" Cade flipped his knife and caught it by the handle. "I can live with that. After you." I slipped the wallet into my back pocket. I raised my fists. I did not like the idea of flattening mortals into flesh waffles, but I was sure I could do it, even in my weakened state. I would be far stronger than any human. "I warned you," I said. "My powers are far beyond your comprehension." Mikey cracked his knuckles. "Uh-huh." He lumbered towards me. As soon as he was in range, I struck. I put all my wrath into that punch. It should have been enough to vaporise Mikey and leave a thug-shaped impression on the tarmac. Instead, he ducked, which I found quite annoying. I stumbled forward. Have to say that when Prometheus fashioned you humans out of clay, he did a shoddy job. Mortal legs are clumsy. I tried to compensate, drawing upon my boundless reserves of agility, but Mikey kicked me in the back, and I fell on my divine face. My nostrils inflated like airbags, my ears popped, the taste of copper filled my mouth. I rolled over, groaning, and found the two blurry thugs staring down at me. "Mikey," said Cade, "are you comprehending this guy's power?" "Nah," said Mikey, "I'm not comprehending it." "Fools," I croaked, "I will destroy you." "Yeah, sure." Cade tossed away his knife. "But first I think we'll stomp you." Cade raised his boot over my face, and the world went black. Chapter 2. A girl from nowhere completes my embarrassment. Stupid bananas. I had not been stomped so badly since my guitar contest against Chuck Berry in 1957. As Cade and Mikey kicked me, I curled into a ball, trying to protect my ribs and head. The pain was intolerable. I retched and shuddered. I blacked out and came to, my vision swimming with red splotches. When my attackers got tired of kicking me, they hit me over the head with a bag of garbage, which burst and covered me in coffee grounds and mouldy fruit peels. At last they stepped away, breathing heavily. Rough hands patted me down and took my wallet. "Looky here," said Cade. "Some cash and an ID for Lester Papadopoulos." Mikey laughed. "Lester? That's even worse than Apollo." I touched my nose, which felt roughly the size and texture of a waterbed mattress. My fingers came away glistening red. "Blood," I muttered. "That's not possible." "It's very possible, Lester." Cade crouched next to me. "And there might be more blood in your near future. You want to explain why you don't have a credit card or a phone? I'd hate to think I did all that stomping for just $100. I stared at the blood on my fingertips. I was a god. I did not have blood. Even when I'd been turned mortal before, golden ichor still ran through my veins. I had never before been so converted. It must be a mistake, a trick, something. I tried to sit up. My hand hit a banana peel and I fell again. My attackers howled in delight. "I love this guy," Mikey said. "Yeah, but the boss told us he'd be loaded," Cade complained. "Boss," I muttered. "Boss." "That's right, Lester." Cade flicked a finger against the side of my head. "Go to that alley," the boss told us. "Easy score." He said we should rough you up, take whatever you had, but this, he waved the cash under my nose, this isn't much of a payday. Despite my predicament, I felt a surge of hopefulness. If these thugs had been sent here to find me, their boss must be a god. No mortal could have known I would fall to earth at this spot. Perhaps Cade and Mikey were not human either. Perhaps they were cleverly disguised monsters or spirits. At least that would explain why they had beaten me so easily. Who is your boss? I struggled to my feet, coffee grounds dribbling from my shoulders. My dizziness made me feel as if I were flying too close to the fumes of primordial chaos. But I refused to be humbled. Did Zeus send you? Or perhaps Ares? I demand an audience. Mikey and Cade looked at each other as if to say, can you believe this guy? Cade picked up his knife. You don't take a hint, do you, Lester? Mikey pulled off his belt, a length of bike chain, and wrapped it around his fist. I decided to sing them into submission. They may have resisted my fist, but no mortal could resist my golden voice. I was trying to decide between You Send Me and an original composition, I'm Your Poetry God, baby, when a voice yelled, Hey! The hooligans turned. Above us, on the second-story fire escape landing, stood a girl of about 12. Leave him alone, she ordered. My first thought was that Artemis had come to my aid. My sister often appeared as a 12-year-old girl for reasons I'd never really fully understood, but something told me this was not she. The girl on the fire escape did not exactly inspire fear. She was small and pudgy, with dark hair chopped in a messy page boy style, and black cat-eye glasses with rhinestones glittering in the corners. Despite the cold, she wore no coat. Her outfit looked like it had been picked by a kindergartner, red sneakers, yellow tights, and a green sleeveless dress. Perhaps she was on her way to a costume party dressed as a traffic light. Still, there was something fierce in her expression. She had the same obstinate scowl my old girlfriend Cyrene used to get whenever she wrestled lions. Mikey and Cade did not seem impressed. Get lost, kid, Mikey told her. The girl stamped her foot, causing the fire escape to shudder. My alley, my rules. Her bossy nasal voice made her sound like she was chiding a playmate in a game of make-believe. Whatever that loser has is mine, including his money. Why is everyone calling me a loser? I asked weakly. The comment seemed unfair, even if I was beat up and covered in garbage, but no one paid me any attention. Cade glared at the girl. The red from his hair seemed to be seeping into his face. You've got to be kidding me. Beat it, you brat! He picked up a rotten apple and threw it. The girl didn't flinch. The fruit landed at her feet and rolled harmlessly to a stop. You want to play with food? The girl wiped her nose. Okay. I didn't see her kick the apple, but it came flying back with deadly accuracy and hit Cade in the nose. He collapsed on his rump. Mikey snarled. He marched towards the fire escape ladder, but a banana peel seemed to sliver directly into his path. He slipped and fell hard. Ow! I backed away from the fallen thugs. I wondered if I should make a run for it, but I could barely hobble. I also did not want to be assaulted with old fruit. The girl climbed over the railing. She dropped to the ground with surprising nimbleness and grabbed a sack of garbage from the dumpster. Stop! Cade did a sort of scuttling crab walk to get away from the girl. Let's talk about this. Mikey groaned and rolled onto his back. The girl pouted. Her lips were chapped. She had wispy black fuzz at the corners of her mouth. I don't like you guys, she said. You should go. Yeah, Kate said. Sure, just... He reached for the money, scattered among the coffee grounds. The girl swung her garbage bag. In mid-air, the plastic exploded, disgorging an impossible number of rotten bananas. They knocked Cade flat. Mikey was plastered with so many peels. He looked like he was being attacked by carnivorous starfish. Leave my alley, the girl said. Now. In the dumpster, more trash bags burst like popcorn kernels, showering Cade and Mikey with radishes, potato peelings, and other compost material. Miraculously, none of it got on me. Despite their injuries, the two thugs scrambled to their feet and ran away, screaming. I turned towards my pint-sized saviour. I was no stranger to dangerous women. My sister could rain down arrows of death. My stepmother, Hera, regularly drove mortals mad so that they would hack each other to pieces. But this garbage-wielding 12-year-old made me nervous. Thank you, I ventured. The girl crossed her arms. On her middle fingers, she wore matching gold rings with crescent signets. Her eyes glinted darkly like a crow's. I can make that comparison because I invented crows. Don't thank me, she said. You're still in my alley. She walked a full circle around me, scrutinising my appearance as if I were a prize cow. I can also make that comparison because I used to collect prize cows. You're the god Apollo. She sounded less than awestruck. She also didn't seem fazed by the idea of gods walking among mortals. You were listening then? She nodded. You don't look like a god. I'm not at my best, I admitted. My father Zeus has exiled me from Olympus. And who are you? She smelled faintly of apple pie, which was surprising, since she looked so grubby. Part of me wanted to find a fresh towel, clean her face and give her money for a hot meal. Part of me wanted to fend her off with a chair in case she decided to bite me. She reminded me of the strays my sister was always adopting. Dogs, panthers, homeless maidens, small dragons. Name is Meg, she said. Short for Megara or Margaret? Margaret. But don't ever call me Margaret. And are you a demigod, Meg? She pushed up her glasses. Why would you think that? Again, she didn't seem surprised by the question. I sensed she had heard the term demigod before. Well, I said, you obviously have some power. You chased off those hooligans with rotten fruit because, well, perhaps you have banana kinesis, or you can control garbage. I once knew a Roman goddess, Closina, who presided over the city sewer system. Perhaps you're related. Meg pouted. I got the impression I might have said something wrong, though I couldn't imagine what. I think I'll just take your money, Meg said. Go on, get out of here. No, wait. Desperation crept into my voice. Please, I may need a bit of assistance. I felt ridiculous, of course. Me, the god of prophecy, plague, archery, healing, music, and several other things I couldn't remember at the moment, asking a colourfully dressed street urchin for help. But I had no one else. If this child chose to take my money and kick me into the cruel winter streets, I didn't think I could stop her. Say I believe you. Meg's voice took on a sing-song tone, as if she were about to announce the rules of the games. I'll be the princess and you'll be the scullery maid. Say I decide to help. What then? Good question, I thought. We are in Manhattan? She swirled and twirled and did a playful skip kick. Hell's Kitchen. It seemed wrong for a child to say Hell's Kitchen. Then again, it seemed wrong for a child to live in an alley and have garbage fights with thugs. I considered walking to the Empire State Building. That was the modern gateway to Mount Olympus. But I doubted the guards would let me up to the secret 600th floor. Zeus would not make it so easy. Perhaps I could find my old friend Chiron the Centaur. He had a training camp on Long Island. He could offer me shelter and guidance. But that would be a dangerous journey. A defenceless god makes for a juicy target. Any monster along the way would cheerfully disembowel me. Jealous spirits and minor gods might also welcome the opportunity. Then there was Cade and Mikey's mysterious boss. I had no idea who he was or whether he had other worse minions to send against me. Even if I made it to Long Island, my new mortal eyes might not be able to find Chiron's camp in its magically camouflaged valley. I needed a guide to get me there, someone experienced and close by. I have an idea. I stood as straight as my injuries allowed. It wasn't easy to look confident with a bloody nose and coffee grounds dripping off my clothes. I know someone who might help. He lives on the Upper East Side. Take me to him and I shall reward you. Meg made a sound between a sneeze and a laugh. Reward me with what? She danced around, plucking $20 bills from the trash. I'm already taking all your money. Hey! She tossed me my wallet, now empty except for Lester Papadopoulos' junior driver's license. Meg sang, I've got your money, I've got your money. I stifled a growl. Listen, child, I won't be mortal forever. Someday I will become a god again. Then I will reward those who helped me and punish those who didn't. She put her hands on her hips. How do you know what will happen? Have you ever been mortal before? Yes, actually, twice. Both times my punishment only lasted a few years at most. Oh yeah? And how did you get back to being all gaudy or whatever? Gaudy is not a word, I pointed out, though my poetic sensibilities were already thinking of ways I might use it. Usually Zeus requires me to work as a slave for some important demigod. This fellow uptown I mentioned, for instance, he'd be perfect. I do whatever tasks my new master requires for a few years. As long as I behave, I'm allowed back to Olympus. Right now I just have to recover my strength and figure out... How do you know for sure which demigod? I blinked. What? Which demigod you're supposed to serve, dummy? Well, it's usually obvious. I just sort of run into them. That's why I want to get to the Upper East Side. My new master will claim my service and... I'm Meg McCaffrey. Meg blew me a raspberry. And I claim your service. Overhead, thunder rumbled in the grey sky. The sound echoed through the city canyons like divine laughter. Whatever was left of my pride turned to ice water and trickled into my socks. I walked right into that, didn't I? Yep. Meg bounced up and down in her red sneakers. We're going to have fun. With great difficulty, I resisted the urge to weep. Are you sure you're not Artemis in disguise? I'm that other thing, Meg said, counting my money. The thing you said before. A demigod. How do you know? Just do. She gave me a smug smile. And now I have a sidekick, God, named Lester. I raised my face to the heavens. Please, Father, I get the point. Please, I can't do this. Zeus did not answer. He was probably too busy recording my humiliation to share on Snapchat. Cheer up, Meg told me. Who's that guy you wanted to see, the guy on the Upper East Side? Another demigod, I said. He knows the way to a camp where I might find shelter, guidance, food. Food? Meg's ears perked up, almost as much as the points on her glasses. Good food? Well, normally I just eat ambrosia, but yes, I suppose. Then that's my first order. We're going to find this guy and take us to the camp place. I sighed miserably. It was going to be a very long servitude. As you wish, I said. Let's find Percy Jackson. Chapter 3. Used to be gaudy, now uptown feeling shoddy. Bah! Haiku don't rhyme. As we trudged up Madison Avenue, my mind swirled with questions. Why hadn't Zeus given me a winter coat? Why did Percy Jackson live so far uptown? Why did pedestrians keep staring at me? I wondered if my divine radiance was starting to return. Perhaps the New Yorkers were awed by my obvious power and unearthly good looks. Meg McCaffrey set me straight. You smell, she said. You look like you've just been mugged. I have just been mugged, also enslaved by a small child. It's not slavery. She chewed off a piece of her thumb cuticle and spat it out. It's more like mutual cooperation. Mutual in the sense that you give orders and I am forced to cooperate. Yup. She stopped in front of a shop window. See? You look gross. My reflection stared back at me, except it was not my reflection. It couldn't be. The face was the same as on Lester Papadopoulos's ID. I looked about 16. My medium-length hair was dark and curly, a style I had rocked in Athenian times and again in the 1970s. My eyes were blue. My face was pleasing enough in a dorkish way, but it was marred by a swollen aubergine-coloured nose, which had dripped a gruesome moustache of blood down my upper lip. Even worse, my cheeks were covered with some sort of rash that looked suspiciously like... My heart climbed into my throat. Horrors, I cried. Is that acne? Immortal gods do not get acne. It is one of our inalienable rights. Yet I leaned closer to the glass and saw that my skin was indeed a scarred landscape of whiteheads and pustules. I balled my fists and wailed to the cruel sky. Zeus, what have I done to deserve this? Meg tugged at my sleeve. You're going to get yourself arrested. What does it matter? I have been made a teenager and not even one with perfect skin. I bet I don't even have... With a cold sense of dread, I lifted my shirt. My midriff was covered with a floral pattern of bruises from my fall into the dumpster and my subsequent kicking. But even worse, I had flab. Oh, no, 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 no. I staggered around the sidewalk, hoping the flab would not follow me. Where are my 8-pack abs? I always have 8-pack abs. I never have low love handles. Never in 4,000 years. Meg made another snorting laugh. Sheesh, crybaby, you're fine. I'm fat. You're average. Average people don't have 8-pack abs. Come on. I wanted to protest that I was not average nor a person, but with growing despair, I realised the term now fitted me perfectly. On the other side of the shop window, a security guard's face loomed, scowling at me. I allowed Meg to pull me further down the street. She skipped along, occasionally stopping to pick up a coin or swing herself around a street lamp. The child seemed unfazed by the cold weather, the dangerous journey ahead, and the fact that I was suffering from acne. How are you so calm? I demanded. You're a demigod walking with a god, on your way to a camp to meet others of your kind. Doesn't any of that surprise you? Eh? She folded one of my $20 bills into a paper aeroplane. I've seen a bunch of weird stuff. I was tempted to ask, what could be weirder than the morning we had just had? I decided I might not be able to stand the stress of knowing. Where are you from? I told you, the alley. No, but your parents, family, friends? A ripple of discomfort passed over her face. She returned her attention to her $20 plane. Not important. My highly advanced people-reading skills told me she was hiding something, but that was not unusual for demigods. For children blessed with an immortal parent, they were strangely sensitive about their backgrounds. And you've never heard of Camp Half-Blood or Camp Jupiter? Nuh-uh. She tested the aeroplane's point on her fingertip. How much further to Perry's house? Percy's. I'm not sure. A few more blocks, I think. That seemed to satisfy Meg. She hopscotched ahead, throwing the cash aeroplane and retrieving it. She cartwheeled through the intersection at East 72nd Street, her clothes a flurry of traffic-light colours so bright I worried the drivers might get confused and run her down. Fortunately, New York drivers were used to swerving around oblivious pedestrians. I decided Meg must be a feral demigod. They were rare but not unheard of. Without any support network, without being discovered by other demigods or taken in for proper training, she had still managed to survive. But her luck would not last. Monsters usually began hunting down and killing young heroes around the time they turned 13, when their true powers began to manifest. Meg did not have long. She needed to be brought to Camp Half-Blood as much as I did. She was fortunate to have met me. I know that last statement seems obvious. Everyone who meets me is fortunate, but you take my meaning. Had I been my usual omniscient self, I could have gleaned Meg's destiny. I could have looked into her soul and seen all I needed to know about her godly parentage, her powers, her motives, and secrets. Now, I was blind to such things. I could only be sure she was demigod because she had successfully claimed my service. Zeus had affirmed her right with a clap of thunder. I felt the binding upon me like a shroud of tightly wrapped banana peels. Whoever Meg McCaffrey was, however she had happened to find me, our fates were now intertwined. It was almost as embarrassing as the acne. We turned east on 82nd Street. By the time we reached 2nd Avenue, the neighbourhood started to look familiar. Rows of apartment buildings, hardware shops, convenience stores and Indian restaurants. I knew that Percy Jackson lived around here somewhere, but my trips across the sky in the Sun Chariot had given me something of a Google Earth orientation. I wasn't used to travelling at street level. Also, in this mortal form, my flawless memory had become flawed. Mortal fears and needs clouded my thoughts. I wanted to eat. I wanted to use the restroom. My body hurt. My clothes stank. I felt as if my brain had been stuffed with wet cotton. Honestly, how do you humans stand it? After a few more blocks, a mixture of sleet and rain began to fall. Beg tried to catch the precipitation on her tongue, which I thought was a very ineffective way to get a drink. And of dirty water, no less. I shivered and concentrated on happy thoughts. The Bahamas, the 9 muses in perfect harmony, the many horrible punishments I would visit on Cade and Mikey when I became a god again. I still wondered about their boss and how he had known where I would fall to earth. No mortal could have had that knowledge. In fact, the more I thought about it, I didn't see how even a god other than myself could have foreseen the future so accurately. After all, I had been the god of prophecy, master of the Oracle of Delphi, distributor of the highest quality sneak previews of destiny for millennia. Of course, I had no shortage of enemies. One of the natural consequences of being so awesome is that I attracted envy from all quarters. But I could only think of one adversary who might be able to tell the future, and if he came looking for me in my weakened state. I tamped down that thought. I had enough to worry about. No point scaring myself to death with what-ifs. We began searching side streets, checking names on apartment mailboxes and intercom panels. The Upper East Side had a surprising number of Jacksons. I found that annoying. After several failed attempts, we turned a corner and there, parked under a grape myrtle tree, sat an older model blue Prius. Its hood bore the unmistakable dents of Pegasus hooves. How was I sure? I know my hoof marks. Also, normal horses do not gallop over Toyotas. Pegasi often do. Aha! I told Meg. We're getting close. Half a block down, I recognised the building. A 5-storey brick terraced house with rusty air conditioner units sagging from the windows. Voila! I cried. At the front steps, Meg stopped as if she'd run into an invisible barrier. She stared back towards 2nd Avenue, her dark eyes turbulent. What's wrong? I asked. Thought I saw them again. Them. I followed her gaze but saw nothing unusual. The thugs from the alley? No. Couple of... She waggled her fingers. Shiny blobs. Saw them back on Park Avenue. My pulse increased from an andante tempo to a lively allegretto. Shiny blobs. Why didn't you say something? Anything. She tapped the temples of her glasses. I've seen a lot of weird stuff. Told you that. Mostly things don't bother me, but if they're following us, I said, that would be bad. I scanned the street again. I saw nothing amiss, but I didn't doubt Meg had seen shiny blobs. Many spirits could appear that way. My own father, Zeus, once took the form of a shiny blob to woo a mortal woman. Why the mortal woman found that attractive, I have no idea. We should get inside, I said. Percy Jackson will help us. Still, Meg held back. She had shown no fear while pelting muggers with garbage in a blind alley, but now she seemed to be having second thoughts about ringing a doorbell. It occurred to me she might have met demigods before. Perhaps those meetings had not gone well. Meg, I said, I realise some demigods are not good. I could tell you stories of all the ones I have had to kill or transform into herbs. Herbs? But Percy Jackson has always been reliable. You have nothing to fear. Besides, he likes me. I taught him everything he knows. She frowned. You did? I found her innocence somewhat charming. So many obvious things that she did not know. Of course. Now let's go up. I rang the buzzer. A few moments later, the garbled voice of a woman answered. Yes? Hello, I said. This is Apollo. Static. The god Apollo, I said, thinking perhaps I should be more specific. Is Percy home? More static, followed by two voices in muted conversation. The front door buzzed. I pushed it open. Just before I stepped inside, I caught a flash of movement in the corner of my eye. I peered down the sidewalk, but again saw nothing. Perhaps it had been a reflection, or a whirl of sleet, or perhaps it had been a shiny blob. My scalp tingled with apprehension. What? Meg asked. Probably nothing. I forced a cheerful tone. I did not want Meg bolting off when we were so close to reaching safety. We were bound together now. I would have to follow her if she ordered me to, and I did not fancy living in the alley with her forever. Let's go up. We can't keep our hosts waiting. After all I had done for Percy Jackson, I expected delight upon my arrival. A tearful welcome, a few burnt offerings, and a small festival in my honour would not have been inappropriate. Instead, the young man swung open the apartment door and said, Why? As usual, I was struck by his resemblance to his father, Poseidon. He had the same sea-green eyes, the same dark tousled hair, the same handsome features that could shift from humour to anger so easily. However, Percy Jackson did not favour his father's chosen garb of beach shorts and Hawaiian shirts. He was dressed in ragged jeans and a blue hoodie with the words AHS, Swim Team, stitched across the front. Meg inched back into the hallway, hiding behind me. I tried for a smile. Percy Jackson, my blessings upon you. I am in need of assistance. Percy's eyes darted from me to Meg. Who's your friend? This is Meg McCaffrey, I said. A demigod who must be taken to Camp Half-Blood. She rescued me from street thugs. Rescued? Percy scanned my battered face. You mean the beat-up teenager look isn't just a disguise? Dude, what happened to you? I may have mentioned the street thugs, but you're a god. About that, I was a god. Percy blinked. Was? Also, I said, I'm fairly certain we're being followed by malicious spirits. If I didn't know how much Percy Jackson adored me, I would have sworn he was about to punch me in my already broken nose. He sighed. Maybe you two should come inside. Chapter 4. Casa de Jackson. No gold-plated throne for guests. Seriously, dude. Another thing I have never understood. How can you mortals live in such tiny places? Where is your pride, your sense of style? The Jackson apartment had no grand throne room, no colonnades, no terraces or banquet halls, or even a thermal bath. It had a tiny living room with an attached kitchen and a single hallway leading to what I assumed were the bedrooms. The place was on the top floor, and while I wasn't so picky as to expect an elevator, I did find it odd there was no landing deck for flying chariots. What did they do when guests from the sky wanted to visit? Standing behind the kitchen counter making a smoothie was a strikingly attractive mortal woman of about 40. Her long brown hair had a few grey streaks, but her bright eyes, quick smile and festive tie-dyed sundress made her look younger. As we entered, she turned off the blender and stepped out from behind the counter. Sacred Sybil, I said. Madam, there is something wrong with your midsection. The woman stopped, mystified, and looked down at her hugely swollen belly. Well, I'm 7 months pregnant. I wanted to cry for her. Carrying such a weight didn't seem natural. My sister Artemis had experience with midwifery, but I'd always found it one area of the healing arts best left to others. How can you bear it? I asked. My mother, Leto, suffered through a long pregnancy, but only because Hera cursed her. Are you cursed? Percy stepped to my side. Apollo, she's not cursed. And can you not mention Hera? You poor woman. I shook my head. A goddess would never allow herself to be so encumbered. She would give birth as soon as she felt like it. That must be nice, the woman agreed. Percy Jackson coughed. So, anyway, Mum, this is Apollo and his friend Meg. Guys, this is my mum. The mother of Jackson smiled and shook our hands. Call me Sally. Her eyes narrowed as she studied my busted nose. Dear, that looks painful. What happened? I attempted to explain, but I choked on my words. I, the silver-tongued god of poetry, could not bring myself to describe my fall from grace to this kind woman. I understood why Poseidon had been so smitten with her. Sally Jackson possessed just the right combination of compassion, strength and beauty. She was one of those rare mortal women who could connect spiritually with a god as an equal. to be neither terrified of us nor greedy for what we can offer, but to provide us with true companionship. If I had still been an immortal, I might have flirted with her myself, but I was now a 16-year-old boy. My mortal form was working its way upon my state of mind. I saw Sally Jackson as a mum, a fact that both consternated and embarrassed me. I thought about how long it had been since I had called my own mother. I should probably take her to lunch when I got back to Olympus. I tell you what, Sally patted my shoulder. Percy can help you get bandaged and cleaned up. I can? Asked Percy. Sally gave him the slightest motherly eyebrow raise. There's a first aid kit in your bathroom, sweetheart. Apollo can take a shower, then wear your extra clothes. You two are about the same size. That, Percy said, is truly depressing. Sally cupped her hand under Meg's chin. Thankfully, Meg did not bite her. Sally's expression remained gentle and reassuring, but I could see the worry in her eyes. No doubt she was thinking, who dressed this poor girl like a traffic light? I have some clothes that might fit you, dear, Sally said. Pre-pregnancy clothes, of course. Let's get you cleaned up. Then we'll get you something to eat. I like food, Meg muttered. Sally laughed. Well, we have that in common. Percy, you take Apollo. We'll meet you back here in a while. In short order, I was showered, bandaged and dressed in Jackson-esque hand-me-downs. Percy left me alone in the bathroom to take care of all this myself, for which I was grateful. He offered me some ambrosia and nectar, food and drink of the gods, to heal my wounds, but I was not sure it would be safe to consume in my mortal state. I didn't want to self-combust, so I stuck with mortal first aid supplies. When I was done, I stared at my battered face in the bathroom mirror. Perhaps teenage angst had permeated the clothes because I felt more like a sulky high schooler than ever. I thought how unfair it was that I was being punished, how lame my father was, how no one else in the history of time had ever experienced problems like mine. Of course, all that was empirically true. No exaggeration was required. At least my wounds seemed to be healing at a faster rate than a normal mortal's. The swelling in my nose had subsided. My ribs still ached, but I no longer felt as if someone were knitting a sweater inside my chest with hot needles. Accelerated healing was the least Zeus could do for me. I was a god of medicinal arts, after all. Zeus probably just wanted me to get well quickly so I could endure more pain, but I was grateful nonetheless. I wondered if I should start a small fire in Percy Jackson's sink, perhaps burn some bandages in thanks, but I decided that might strain the Jacksons' hospitality. I examined the black T-shirt Percy had given me. Emblazoned on the front was Led Zeppelin's logo for their record label, Winged Icarus Falling from the Sky. I had no problem with Led Zeppelin. I'd inspired all their best songs, but I had a sneaking suspicion that Percy had given me this shirt as a joke. The fall from the sky. Yes, ha-ha. I didn't need to be a god of poetry to spot the metaphor. I decided not to comment on it. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I took a deep breath, and then I did my usual motivational speech in the mirror. You are gorgeous, and people love you. I went out to face the world. Percy was sitting on his bed, staring at the trail of blood droplets I had made across the carpet. His carpet. Sorry about that, I said. Percy spread his hands. Actually, I was thinking about the last time I had a nosebleed. Oh. The memory came back to me, though hazy and incomplete. Athens, the Acropolis. We gods had battled side by side with Percy Jackson and his comrades. We defeated an army of giants, but a drop of Percy's blood hit the earth and awakened the Earth Mother Gaia, who had not been in a good mood. That's when Zeus turned on me. He'd accused me of starting the whole thing, just because Gaia had duped one of my progeny, a boy named Octavian, into plunging the Roman and Greek demigod camps into civil war that almost destroyed human civilization. I ask you, how was that my fault? Regardless, Zeus had held me responsible for Octavian's delusions of grandeur. Zeus seemed to consider egotism a trait the boy had inherited from me, which is ridiculous. I am much too self-aware to be egotistical. What happened to you, man? Percy's voice stirred me from my reverie. The war ended in August. It's January. It is. I suppose the wintry weather should have been a clue, but I hadn't given it much thought. Last I saw you, Percy said, Zeus was chewing you out at the Acropolis. Then, bam, he vaporized you. Nobody's seen or heard from you for 6 months. I tried to recall, but my memories of godhood were getting fuzzier rather than clearer. What had happened in the last 6 months? Had I been in some kind of stasis? Had Zeus taken that long to decide what to do with me? Perhaps there was a reason he'd waited until this moment to hurl me to earth. Father's voice still rang in my ears. Your fault. Your punishment. My shame felt fresh and raw, as if the conversation had just happened. But I could not be sure. After being alive for so many millennia, I had trouble keeping track of time even in the best of circumstances. I would hear a song on Spotify and think, oh, that's new. Then I'd realise it was Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 20 in D minor from 200 years ago. Or I'd wonder why Herodotus, the historian, wasn't in my contacts list. Then I'd remember Herodotus didn't have a smartphone because he had been dead since the Iron Age. It's very irritating how quickly you mortals die. I don't know where I've been, I admitted. I have some memory gaps. Percy winced. I hate memory gaps. Last year I lost an entire semester thanks to Hera. Ah, yes. I couldn't quite remember what Percy Jackson was talking about. During the war with Gaia, I had been focused mostly on my own fabulous exploits, but I suppose he and his friends had undergone a few minor hardships. Well, never fear, I said. There are always new opportunities to win fame. That's why I've come to you for help. He gave me that confusing expression again, as if he wanted to kick me, when I was sure he must be struggling to contain his gratitude. Look, man, would you please refrain from calling me man, I asked. It is a painful reminder that I am a man. Okay, Apollo, I'm fine with driving you and Meg to camp if that's what you want. I never turn away a demigod who needs help. Wonderful. Do you have something besides the Prius? A Maserati, perhaps? I'd settle for a Lamborghini. But, Percy continued, I can't get involved in another big prophecy or whatever. I've made promises. I stared at him, not quite comprehending. Promises? Percy laced his fingers. They were long and nimble. He would have made an excellent musician. I lost most of my junior year because of the war with Gaia. I've spent this entire autumn playing catch-up with my classes. If I want to go to college with Annabeth next autumn, I have to stay out of trouble and get my diploma. Annabeth. I tried to place the name. She's the blonde, scary one. That's her. I promised her specifically that I wouldn't get myself killed while she's gone. Gone? Percy waved vaguely towards the north. She's in Boston for a few weeks. Some family emergency. The point is, you're saying you cannot offer me your undivided service to restore me to my throne? Yeah. He pointed at the bedroom doorway. Beside, my mum's pregnant. I'm going to have a baby sister. I'd like to be around to get to know her. Well, I understand that. I remember when Artemis was born. Aren't you twins? I've always regarded her as my little sister. Percy's mouth twitched. Anyway, my mum's got that going on, and her first novel is going to be published this spring as well. I'd like to stay alive long enough to... Wonderful, I said. Remind her to burn the proper sacrifices. Calliope is quite touchy with novelists when novelists forget to thank her. Okay, but what I'm saying, I can't go off on another world-stomping quest. I can't do that to my family. Percy glanced towards his window. On the sill was a potted plant with delicate silver leaves, possibly moonlace. I've already seen my mum. Enough heart attacks. I've given her enough heart attacks for one lifetime. She's just about forgiven me for disappearing last year, but I swore to her and Paul that I wouldn't do anything like that again. Paul? My stepdad. He's a teacher, in service today. He's a good guy. I see. In truth, I didn't see. I wanted to get back to talking about my problems. I was impatient with Percy for doing and turning the conversation to himself. Sadly, I have found this sort of self-centeredness common among demigods. You do understand that I must find a way to return to Olympus, I said. This will probably involve many harrowing trials with a high chance of death. Can you turn down such glory? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I can, sorry. I pursed my lips. It's always disappointed me when mortals put themselves first and failed to see the big picture, the importance of putting me first. But I had to remind myself that this young man had helped me out on many previous occasions. He had earned my goodwill. I understand, I said with incredible generosity. You will at least escort us to Camp Half-Blood. That I can do. Percy reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a ballpoint pen. For a moment I thought he wanted my autograph. I can't tell you how often that happens. Then I remembered the pen was the disguised form of his sword, Riptide. He smiled, and some of that old demigod mischief twinkled in his eyes. Let's see if Meg's ready for a field trip. Chapter 5. 7-layer dip. Chocolate chip cookies in blue. I love this woman. Sally Jackson was a witch to rival Circe. She had transformed Meg from a street urchin into a shockingly pretty young girl. Meg's dark page-boy hair was glossy and brushed. Her round face was scrubbed clean of grime. Her cat-eye glasses had been polished so the rhinestones sparkled. She'd evidently insisted on keeping her old red sneakers, but she wore new black leggings and a knee-length frock of shifting green hues. Mrs. Jackson had figured out how to keep Meg's old look, but tweak it to be more complimentary. Meg now had an elfish springtime aura that reminded me very much of a dryad. In fact, a sudden wave of emotion overwhelmed me. I choked back a sob. Meg pouted. Do I look that bad? No, I managed. It's just... I wanted to say, you remind me of someone, but I didn't dare open that line of conversation. Only 2 mortals ever had broken my heart. Even after so many centuries, I couldn't think of her, couldn't say her name without falling into despair. Don't misunderstand me. I felt no attraction to Meg. I was 16 or 4,000 plus, depending on how you looked at it. She was a very young 12, but the way she appeared now, Meg McCaffrey might have been the daughter of my former love, if my former love had lived long enough to have children. It was too painful. I looked away. Well, Sally Jackson said with forced cheerfulness, how about I make some lunch while you 3, talk? She gave Percy a worried glance and then headed to the kitchen, her hands protectively over her pregnant belly. Meg sat on the edge of the sofa. Percy, your mum is so normal. Thanks, I guess. He picked up a stack of test preparation manuals from the coffee table and chucked them aside. I see you like to study, I said. Well done. Percy snorted. I hate to study. I've been guaranteed admission with a full scholarship to New Rome University, but they're still requiring me to pass all my high school courses and score well on the SAT. Can you believe that? Not to mention I have to pass the DS Tomp. The what? Meg asked. An exam for Roman demigods, I told her. The demigod standard test of mad powers. Percy frowned. That's what it stands for? I should know. I wrote the music and poetry analysis sections. I will never forgive you for that, Percy said. Meg swung her feet. So, you're really a demigod, like me? Afraid so. Percy sank into the armchair, leaving me to take the sofa next to Meg. My dad is the godly one, Poseidon. What about your parents? Meg's legs went still. She studied her chewed cuticles, the matching crescent rings glinting on her middle fingers. Never knew them. Much. Percy hesitated. Foster home? Step-parents? I thought of a certain plant, the Mimosa pudica, which the god Pan created. As soon as its leaves are touched, the plant closes up defensively. Meg seemed to be playing Mimosa, folding inwards under Percy's questions. Percy raised his hands. Sorry, I didn't mean to pry. He gave me an inquisitive look. So, how did you guys meet? I told him the story. I may have exaggerated my brave defence against Cade and Mikey, just for narrative effect, you understand. As I finished, Sally Jackson returned. She set down a bowl of tortilla chips and a casserole dish filled with elaborate dip in multicoloured strata like sedimentary rock. I'll be back with the sandwiches, she said, but I had some leftover 7-layer dip. Yum! Percy dug in with a tortilla chip. She's kind of famous for this, guys. Sally ruffled his hair. There's guacamole, sour cream, refried beans, salsa. 7 layers. I looked up in wonder. You knew 7 is my sacred number. You invented this for me? Sally wiped her hands on her apron. Well, actually, I can't take credit. You are too modest. I tried some of the dip. It tasted almost as good as Ambrosia nachos. You will have immortal fame for this, Sally Jackson. That's sweet. She pointed to the kitchen. I'll be right back. Soon we were ploughing through turkey sandwiches, chips and dip and banana smoothies. Meg ate like a chipmunk, shoving more food in her mouth than she could possibly chew. My belly was full. I had never been so happy. I had a strange desire to fire up an Xbox and play Call of Duty. Percy, I said, your mum is awesome. I know, right? He finished his smoothie. So, back to your story. You have to be Meg's servant now? You guys barely know each other. Barely is generous, I said. Nevertheless, yes, my fate is now linked with young McCaffrey. We are cooperating, Meg said. She seemed to savour that word. From his pocket, Percy fished his ballpoint pen. He tapped it thoughtfully against his knee. And this whole turning into a mortal thing, you've done it twice before. Not by choice, I assured him. The first time we had a little rebellion in Olympus. We tried to overthrow Zeus. Percy winced. I'm guessing that didn't go well. I got most of the blame, naturally. Oh, and your father Poseidon. We were both cast down to earth as mortals, forced to serve Laomedon, the king of Troy. He was a harsh master. He even refused to pay us for our work. Meg nearly choked on her sandwich. I have to pay you? I had a terrifying image of Meg McCaffrey trying to pay me in bottle caps, marbles, and pieces of coloured string. Never fear, I told her. I won't be presenting you with a bill. But as I was saying, the second time I became mortal, Zeus got mad because I killed some of his cyclopses. Percy frowned. Dude, not cool. My brother is a cyclops. These were wicked Cyclopses. They made the lightning bolt that killed one of my sons. Meg bounced on the arm of the sofa. Percy's brother is a Cyclops? That's crazy. I took a deep breath, trying to find my happy place. At any rate, I was bound to Admetus, the king of Thessaly. He was a kind master. I liked him so much that I made all his cows have twin calves. Can I have baby cows? Meg asked. Well, Meg, I said, first you would have to have some mommy cows, you see. Guys, Percy interrupted, so just to recap, you have to be Meg's servant for some unknown amount of time, I said. Probably a year, possibly more. And during that time, I will undoubtedly face many trials and hardships. Like getting me my cows, Meg said. I gritted my teeth. What those trials will be, I do not yet know. But if I suffer through them and prove I am worthy, Zeus will forgive me and allow me to become a god again. Percy did not look convinced, probably because I did not sound convincing. I had to believe my mortal punishment was temporary, as it had been the last 2 times. Yet Zeus had created a strict rule for baseball and prison sentences. 3 strikes, you're out. I could only hope this would not apply to me. I need time to get my bearings, I said. Once we get to Camp Half-Blood, I can consult with Chiron. I can figure out which of my godly powers remain with me in this mortal form. If any, Percy said. Let's think positive. Percy sat back in his armchair. Any idea what kind of spirits are following you? Shiny blobs, Meg said. They were shiny and sort of, blobby. Percy nodded gravely. Those are the worst kind. It hardly matters, I said. Whatever they are, we have to flee. Once we reach camp, the magical borders will protect me. And me? Meg asked. Oh yes, you too. Percy frowned. Apollo, if you're really mortal, like 100% mortal, can you even get into Camp Half-Blood? The 7-layer dip began to churn in my stomach. Please don't say that. Of course I'll get in. I have to. But you could get hurt in a battle now, Percy mused. Then again, maybe monsters would ignore you because you're not important. Stop. My hands trembled. Being immortal was traumatic enough. The thought of being barred from camp, of being unimportant. No, that simply could not be. I'm sure I've retained some powers, I said. I'm still gorgeous, for instance. If I could just get rid of this acne and lose some flab, I must have other abilities. Percy turned to Meg. What about you? I hear you throw a mean garbage bag. Any other skills you should know about? Or we should know about? Summoning lightning? Making toilets explode? Meg smiled hesitantly. That's not a power. Sure it is, Percy said. Some of the best demigods have to... Well, they've got their start by blowing up toilets. Meg giggled. I did not like the way she was grinning at Percy. I didn't want the girl to develop a crush. We might never get out of here. As much as I enjoyed Sally Jackson's cooking, the divine smell of baking cookies was even now wafting from the kitchen. I needed to make haste to camp. Ahem. I rubbed my hands. How soon can we leave? Percy glanced at the wall clock. Right now, I guess. If you're being followed, I'd rather have monsters on our trail than sniffing around the apartment. Good man, I said. Percy gestured with distaste at his test manuals. I just have to be back tonight. Got a lot of studying. The first 2 times I took the SAT, if it wasn't for Annabeth helping me out. Who's that? Meg asked. My girlfriend. Meg frowned. I was glad there was no garbage bags nearby for her to throw. So take a break, I urged. Your brain will be refreshed after an easy drive to Long Island. Huh, Percy said. There's a lazy kind of logic to that. Okay, let's do it. He rose just as Sally Jackson walked in with a plate of fresh-baked chocolate chip cookies. For some reason, the cookies were blue, but they smelled heavenly. And I should know, I'm from heaven. Mum, don't freak, Percy said. Sally sighed. Oh, I hate it when you say that. I'm just going to take these 2 to camp, that's all. I'll be right back. I think I've heard that before. I promise. Sally looked at me, then Meg. Her expression softened, her innate kindness perhaps overweighing her concern. All right, be careful. It was lovely meeting you both. Please try not to die. Percy kissed her on the cheek. He reached for the cookies, but she moved the plate away. Oh no, she said. Apollo and Meg can have one, but I'm keeping the rest hostage until you're back safely. And hurry, dear, it would be a shame if Paul ate them all when he gets home. Percy's expression turned grim. He faced us. You hear that, guys? A batch of cookies is depending on me. If you get me killed on the way to camp, I am going to be ticked off. Chapter 6. Aquaman driving? Couldn't possibly be worse. Oh wait, now it is. Much to my disappointment, the Jacksons did not have a spare bow or quiver to lend me. I suck at archery, Percy explained. Yes, but I don't, I said. This is why you should always plan for my needs. Sally lent Meg and me some proper winter fleece jackets, however. Mine was blue and the word Blothis written inside the neckline. Perhaps that was an arcane word against evil spirits. Hecate would have known. Sorcery really wasn't my thing. Once we reached the Prius, Meg called shotgun, which was yet another example of my unfair existence. Gods do not ride in the back. I again suggested following them in a Maserati or a Lamborghini, but Percy admitted he had neither. The Prius was the only car his family owned. I mean, wow. Just wow. Sitting in the back seat, I quickly became car sick. I was used to driving my sun chariot across the sky, where every lane was the fast lane. I was not used to the Long Island Expressway. Believe me, even at midday in the middle of January, there is nothing express about your expressways. The Percy braked and lurched forward. I sorely wished I could launch a fireball in front of us and melt cars to make way for our clearly more important journey. Doesn't your Prius have flamethrowers? I demanded. Lasers? At least some Hephaestion bumper blades? What sort of cheap economy vehicle is this? Percy glanced in the rearview mirror. You have rides like that on Mount Olympus? We don't have traffic jams, I said. That I can promise you. Meg tugged at her crescent moon rings. Again, I wondered if she had some connection to Artemis. The moon was my sister's symbol. Perhaps Artemis had sent Meg to look after me. Yet that didn't seem right. Artemis had trouble sharing anything with me. Demigods, arrows, nations, birthday parties. It's a twin thing. Also, Meg McCaffrey did not strike me as one of my sister's followers. Meg had another sort of aura, one I could have been able to recognise easily if I were a god. But no, I had to rely on mortal intuition, which was like trying to pick up sewing needles while wearing oven mitts. Meg turned and gazed out of the rear window, probably checking for any shiny blobs pursuing us. At least, we're not being... Don't say it, Percy warned. Meg huffed. You don't know what I was going to... You were going to say, at least we're not being followed, Percy said. That'll jinx us. Immediately we'll notice that we are being followed. Then we'll end up in a big battle that totals my family car and probably destroys the whole freeway. Then we'll have to run all the way to camp. Meg's eyes widened. You can tell the future. Didn't need to. Percy changed lanes to one that was crawling slightly less slowly. I've just done this a lot. Besides, he shot me an accusing look. Nobody can tell the future anymore. The oracle isn't working. What oracle? Meg asked. Neither of us answered. For a moment I was too stunned to speak, and believe me, I have to be very stunned for that to happen. It still isn't working, I said in a small voice. You didn't know? Percy asked. I mean, sure, you've been out of it for 6 months, but this happened on your watch. That was unjust. I had been busy hiding from Zeus's wrath at the time, which was a perfectly legitimate excuse. How was I to know that Gaia would take advantage of the chaos of war and raise my oldest, greatest enemy from the depths of Tartarus so he could take possession of his old lair in the cave of Delphi and cut off the source of my prophetic power? Oh yes, I hear you critics out there. You're the god of prophecy, Apollo. How could you not know that would happen? The next sound you hear will be me blowing you a giant Meg McCaffrey quality raspberry. I swallowed back the taste of fear in 7-layer dip. I assumed... I hoped this would be taken care of by now. You mean by demigods, Percy said. Going on a big quest to reclaim the Oracle of Delphi. Exactly. I knew Percy would understand. I suppose Chiron just forgot. I'll remind him when we get to camp, and he can dispatch some of you talented fodder. I mean heroes. Well, here's the thing, Percy said. To go on a quest, we need a prophecy, right? Those are the rules. If there's no oracle, there are no prophecies. So we're stuck in a catch-88, I sighed. Meg threw a piece of lint at me. It's a catch-22. No, I explained patiently. This is a catch-88, which is 4 times as bad. I felt as if I were floating in a warm bath and someone had pulled out the stopper. The water swirled around me, tugging me downward. Soon I would be left shivering and exposed, or else I would be sucked down the drain into the sewers of hopelessness. Don't laugh, that's a perfectly fine metaphor. Also, when you're a god, you can get sucked down a drain quite easily. If you're caught off guard and relaxed and you happen to change form at the wrong moment. Once I woke up in a sewage treatment facility in Biloxi, but that's another story. I was beginning to see what was in store for me during my mortal sojourn. The oracle was held by hostile forces. My adversary lay coiled and waiting, growing stronger every day on the magical fumes of the Delphic caverns, and I was a weak mortal bound to an untrained demigod who threw garbage and chewed her cuticles. No, Zeus could not possibly expect me to fix this, not in my present condition. And yet someone had sent those thugs to intercept me in the alley. Someone had known where I would land. Nobody can tell the future anymore, Percy had said. But that wasn't quite true. Hey, you two. Meg hit us both with pieces of lint. Where was she finding this lint? I realised I'd been ignoring her. It had felt good while it lasted. Yes, sorry, Meg, I said. You see, the Oracle of Delphi is an ancient... I don't care about that, she said. There are 3 shiny blobs now. What? Percy asked. She pointed behind us. Look! Weaving through the traffic, closing in on us rapidly, were 3 glittery, vaguely humanoid apparitions, like billowing plumes from smoke grenades touched by King Midas. Just once I'd like an easy commute, Percy grumbled. Everybody hold on. We're going cross-country. Percy's definition of cross-country was different from mine. I envisaged crossing an actual countryside. Instead, Percy shot down the nearest exit ramp, wove across the parking lot of a shopping mall, and then blasted through the drive-thru of a Mexican restaurant, without even ordering anything. We swerved into an industrial area of dilapidated warehouses, the smoking apparition still closing in behind us. My knuckles turned white on my seatbelt shoulder strap. Is your plan to avoid a fight by dying in a traffic accident? I demanded. Ha ha! Percy yanked the wheel to the right. We sped north, the warehouses giving way to the hodgepodge of apartment buildings and abandoned strip malls. I'm getting us to the beach. I fight better near water. Because Poseidon? Meg asked, steadying herself against the door handle. Yep, Percy agreed. That pretty much describes my entire life. Because Poseidon. Meg bounced up and down with excitement, which seemed pointless to me, since we were already bouncing quite a lot. You're going to be like Aquaman, she asked. Get the fish to fight for you. Thanks, Percy said. Haven't heard enough Aquaman jokes for one lifetime. I wasn't joking, Meg protested. I glanced out of the rear window. The 3 glittering plumes were still gaining. One of them passed through a middle-aged man crossing the street. The mortal pedestrian instantly collapsed. Ah, I know these spirits, I cried. They are, My brain clouded over. What? Percy demanded. They are what? I've forgotten. I hate being mortal. 4,000 years of knowledge, the secrets of the universe, a sea of wisdom, lost because I can't contain it all in this teacup of a head. Hold on. Percy flew through a railroad crossing and the Prius went airborne. Meg yelped as her head hit the ceiling. Then she began giggling uncontrollably. The landscape opened into actual countryside. Fallow fields, dormant vineyards, orchards of bare fruit trees. Just another mile or so to the beach, Percy said. Plus, we're almost to the western edge of camp. We can do it. We can do it. Actually, we couldn't. One of the shiny smoke clouds pulled a dirty trick, pluming from the tarmac directly in front of us. Instinctively, Percy swerved. The Prius went off the road, straight through a barbed wire fence and into an orchard. Percy managed to avoid hitting any of the trees, but the car skidded in the icy mud and wedged itself between 2 trunks. Miraculously, the airbags did not deploy. Percy popped his seatbelt. You guys okay? Meg shoved against her passenger side door. Won't open. Get me out of here. Percy tried his own door. It was firmly jammed against the side of a peach tree. Back here, I said. Climb over. I kicked my door open and staggered out, my legs feeling like worn shock absorbers. The 3 smoky figures had stopped at the edge of the orchard. Now they advanced slowly, taking on solid shapes. They grew arms and legs. Their faces formed eyes and wide, hungry mouths. I knew instinctively that I had dealt with these spirits before. I couldn't remember what they were, but I had dispelled them many times, swatting them into oblivion with no more effort than I would a swarm of gnats. Unfortunately, I wasn't a god now. I was a panicky 16-year-old. My palms sweated, my teeth chattered. My only coherent thought was, yikes! Percy and Meg struggled to get out of the Prius. They needed time, which meant I had to run interference. Stop! I bellowed at the spirits. I am the god Apollo. To my pleasant surprise, the 3 spirits stopped. They hovered in place about 40 feet away. I heard Meg grunt as she tumbled out of the back seat. Percy scrambled after her. I advanced towards the spirits, the frosty mud crunching under my shoes. My breath steamed in the cold air. I raised my hand in an ancient 3-fingered gesture for warding off evil. Leave us, or be destroyed, I told the spirits. Blowfis! The smoky shapes trembled. My hopes lifted. I waited for them to dissipate or flee in terror. Instead, they solidified into ghoulish corpses with yellow eyes. Their clothes were tattered rags, their limbs covered with gaping wounds and running sores. Oh dear, my Adam's apple dropped into my chest like a billiard ball. I remember now. Percy and Meg stepped to either side of me. With a metallic shink, Percy's pen grew into a blade of glowing celestial bronze. Remember what? He asked. How to kill these things? No, I said. I remember what they are. Nosoi, plague spirits. Also, they can't be killed. Chapter 7. Tag with plague spirits. You're it and you're infectious. Have fun with that. Lol. Nosoi. Percy planted his feet in a fighting stance. You know, I keep thinking I have now killed every single thing in Greek mythology, but the list never seems to end. You haven't killed me yet, I noted. Don't tempt me. The three Nosoi shuffled forward. Their cadaverous mouths gaped, their tongues lolled, their eyes glistened with a film of yellow mucus. These creatures are not myths, I said. Of course, most things in those old myths are not myths, except for that story about how I flayed the satyr, Marsyas, alive. That was a total lie. Percy glanced at me. You did what? Guys, Meg picked up a dead tree branch. Could we talk about that later? The middle plague spirit spoke. Apollo! His voice gurgled like a seal with bronchitis. We have come to... Let me stop you right there. I crossed my arms and feigned arrogant indifference. Difficult for me, but I managed. You've come to take your revenge on me, eh? I looked at my demigod friends. You see, Nosoi are the spirits of disease. Once I was born, spreading illnesses became part of my job. I used plague arrows to strike down naughty populations with smallpox, athlete's foot, that sort of thing. Gross, Meg said. Somebody's got to do it, I said. Better a god, regulated by the Council of Olympus and with the proper health permits, than a horde of uncontrolled spirits like these. The spirit on the left gurgled. We're trying to have a moment here. Stop interrupting. We wish to be free, uncontrolled. Yes, I know. You'll destroy me, then you'll spread every known malady across the world. You've been wanting to do that ever since Pandora let you out of that jar, but you can't. I will strike you down. Perhaps you are wondering how I could act so confident and calm. In fact, I was terrified. My 16-year-old mortal instincts were screaming, run! My knees were knocking together and my right eye had developed a nasty twitch. But the secret to dealing with plague spirits was to keep talking, so as to appear in charge and unafraid. I trusted that this would allow my demigod companions time to come up with a clever plan to save me. I certainly hoped Meg and Percy were working on such a plan. The spirit on the right bared his rotten teeth. What will you strike us down with? Where is your bow? It appears to be missing, I agreed. But is it really? What if it's cleverly hidden under this Led Zeppelin t-shirt, and I am about to whip it out and shoot you all? The Nosoi shuffled nervously. You lie, said the one in the middle. Percy cleared his throat. Hey, Apollo. Finally, I thought. I know what you're going to say, I told him. You and Meg have come up with a clever plan to hold off these spirits while I run away to camp. I hate to see you sacrifice yourselves, but, that's not what I was going to say. Percy raised his blade. I was going to ask what happens if I just slice and dice these mouth-breathers with celestial bronze. The middle spirit chortled, his yellow eyes gleaming. A sword is such a small weapon. It does not have the poetry of a good epidemic. Stop right there, I said. You can't claim both my plagues and my poetry. You are right, said the spirit. Enough words. The three corpses shambled forward. I thrust out my arms, hoping to blast them to dust. Nothing happened. This is insufferable, I complained. How do demigods do it without an auto-win power? Meg jabbed her tree branch into the nearest spirit's chest. The branch struck and stuck. Glittering smoke began swirling down the length of the wood. Let go, I warned. Don't let the Nosoi touch you. Meg released the branch and scampered away. Meanwhile, Percy Jackson charged into battle. He swung his sword, dodging the spirit's attempts to snare him, but his efforts were futile. Whenever his blade connected with the Nosoi, their body simply dissolved into glittering mist and then re-solidified. A spirit lunged to grab him. From the ground, Meg scooped up a frozen black peach and threw it with such force it embedded itself in the spirit's forehead, knocking him down. We gotta run, Meg decided. Yeah. Percy backtracked towards us. I like that idea. I knew running would not help. If it were possible to run from these disease spirits, the medieval Europeans would have put on their sneakers and escaped the Black Death. And FYI, the Black Death was not my fault. I took 1 century off to lie around the beach in Cabo and came back and found that the Nosoi had got loose and a third of the continent was dead. Gods, I was so irritated. But I was too terrified to argue. Meg and Percy sprinted off through the orchard and I followed. Percy pointed to a line of hills about a mile ahead. That's the western border of camp, if we can just get there. We passed an irrigation tank on a tractor trailer. With a casual flick of his hand, Percy caused the side of the tank to rupture. A wall of water crashed into the free Nosoi behind us. That was good, Meg grinned, skipping along in her new green dress. We're going to make it. No, I thought. We're not. My chest ached. Each breath was a ragged wheeze. I resented that these two demigods could carry on a conversation while running for their lives, while I, the immortal Apollo, was reduced to gasping like a catfish. We can't, I gulped. They'll just... Before I could finish, 3 glittering pillars of smoke plumed from the ground in front of us. 2 of the noisoids solidified into cadavers, one with a peach for a third eye, the other with a tree branch sticking out of his chest. The third spirit, well, Percy didn't see it in time. He ran straight into the plume of smoke. Don't breathe, I warned him. Percy's eyes bugged out as if to say, seriously? He fell to his knees, clawing at his throat. As a son of Poseidon, he could probably breathe underwater, but holding one's breath for an indeterminate amount of time was a different matter altogether. Meg picked up another withered peach from the field, but it would offer her little defence against the forces of darkness. I tried to figure out how to help Percy, because I am all about helping. But the branch-impaled Knossos charged at me. I turned and fled, running face first into a tree. I'd like to tell you that was part of my plan, but even I, with all my poetic skill, cannot put a positive spin on it. I found myself flat on my back, spots dancing in my eyes, the cadaverous visage of the plague spirit looming over me. Which fatal illness shall I use to kill the great Apollo? The spirit gurgled. Anthrax? Perhaps Ebola. Hangnails, I suggested, trying to squirm away from my tormentor. I live in fear of hangnails. I have the answer, the spirit cried, rudely ignoring me. Let's try this. He dissolved into smoke and settled over me like a glittering blanket. Chapter 8. Peaches in combat. I am hanging it up now. My brain exploded. I will not say my life passed before my eyes. I wish it had. That would have taken several months, giving me time to figure out an escape plan. Instead, my regrets passed before my eyes. Despite being a gloriously perfect being, I do have a few regrets. I remember that day at Abbey Road Studios, when my envy led me to set rancor in the hearts of John and Paul and break up the Beatles. I remembered Achilles falling on the plains of Troy, cut down by an unworthy archer because of my wrath. I saw Hyacinthus, his bronze shoulders and dark ringlets gleaming in the sunlight, standing on the sideline of the discus field. He gave me a brilliant smile. Even you can't throw that far, he teased. Watch me, I said. I threw the discus, then stared in horror as a gust of wind made it veer, inexplicably, towards Hyacinthus's handsome face. And, of course, I saw her, the other love of my life, her fair skin transforming into bark, her hair sprouting green leaves, her eyes hardening into rivulets of sap. Those memories brought back so much pain that you might think I would welcome the glittering plague mist descending over me. Yet my new mortal self rebelled. I was too young to die. I hadn't even had my first kiss. Yes, my godly catalogue of exes was filled with more beautiful people than a Kardashian party guest list, but none of that seemed real to me. If I'm being totally honest, I have to confess something else. All gods fear death, even when we are not encased in mortal forms. That may seem silly. We are immortal. But as you've seen, immortality can be taken away. In my case, 3 stinking times. Gods know about fading. They know about being forgotten over the centuries. The idea of ceasing to exist altogether terrifies us. In fact, well, Zeus would not like me sharing this information, and if you tell anyone, I will deny I ever said it. But the truth is, we gods are a little in awe of you mortals. You spend your whole lives knowing you will die. No matter how many friends and relatives you have, your puny existence will quickly be forgotten. How do you cope with it? Why are you not running around constantly screaming and pulling your hair out? Your bravery, I must admit, is quite admirable. Now, where was I? Right, I was dying. I rolled around in the mud, holding my breath. I tried to brush off the disease cloud, but it was not as easy as swatting a fly or an uppity mortal. I caught a glimpse of Meg, playing a deadly game of tag with the third Knossos, trying to keep a peach tree between herself and the spirit. She yelled something to me, but her voice seemed tinny and far away. Somewhere to my left, the ground shook. A miniature geyser erupted from the field. Percy crawled towards it desperately. He thrust his face in the water, washing away the smoke. My eyesight began to dim. Percy struggled to his feet. He ripped out the source of the geyser, an irrigation pipe, and turned the water on me. Normally I do not like being doused. Every time I go camping with Artemis, she likes to wake me up with a bucket of ice-cold water, but in this case I didn't mind. The water disrupted the smoke, allowing me to roll away and gasp for air. Nearby, our two gaseous enemies reformed as dripping wet corpses, their yellow eyes glowing with annoyance. Meg yelled again. This time I understood her words. Get down! I found this inconsiderate, since I'd only just got up. All around the orchard, the frozen blackened remnants of the harvest were beginning to levitate. Believe me, in 4,000 years, I have seen some strange things. I've seen the dreaming face of Uranus, etched in stars across the heavens, and the full fury of Typhon, as he raged across the earth. I've seen men turn into snakes and ants turn into men, and otherwise rational people dance the Macarena. But never before had I seen an uprising of frozen fruit. Percy and I hit the ground as peaches shot around the orchard, ricocheting off trees like snooker balls, ripping through the Noisoi's cadaverous bodies. If I had been standing up, I would have been killed, but Meg simply stood there, unfazed and unhurt, as frozen dead fruit zinged around her. All three Noisoi collapsed, riddled with holes. Every piece of fruit dropped to the ground. Percy looked up, his eyes red and puffy. What just happened? He sounded congested, which meant he hadn't completely escaped the effects of the plague cloud, but at least he wasn't dead. That was generally a good sign. I don't know, I admitted. Meg, is it safe? She was staring in amazement at the carnage of fruit, mangled corpses and broken tree limbs. I'm not sure. How do you do that? Percy snuffled. Meg looked horrified. I didn't. I just knew it would happen. One of the cadavers began to stir. It got up, wobbling on its heavily perforated legs. But you did do it, the spirit growled. You are strong, child. The other two corpses rose. Not strong enough, said the second Knossos. We will finish you now. The third spirit bared his rotten teeth. Your guardian would be so disappointed. Guardian? Perhaps the spirit meant me. When in doubt, I usually assume the conversation was about me. Meg looked as if she'd been punched in the gut. Her face paled, her arms trembled. She stamped her foot and yelled, No! More peaches swirled into the air. This time the fruit blurred together in a fructose dust devil, until standing in front of Meg was a creature like a pudgy human toddler, wearing only a linen diaper. Protruding from his back were wings made of leafy branches. His babyish face might have been cute except for the glowing green eyes and pointy fangs. The creature snarled and snapped at the air. Oh no, Percy shook his head. I hate these things. The three Noisoi also did not look pleased. They edged away from the snarling baby. What is it? Meg asked. I stared at her in disbelief. She had to be the cause of the fruit-based strangeness, but she looked as shocked as we were. Unfortunately, if Meg didn't know how she had summoned this creature, she would not know how to make it go away, and, like Percy Jackson, I was no fan of Carpoi. It's a grain spirit, I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. I've never seen a peach Carpos before, but if it's as vicious as other types... I was about to say we're doomed, but that seemed both obvious and depressing. The peach baby turned towards the Noisoi. For a moment I feared he would make some hellish alliance, an axis of evil between illnesses and fruits. The middle corpse, the one with the peach in his forehead, inched backwards. Do not interfere, he warned the Carpos. We will not allow... The peach baby launched himself at the Knossos and bit his head off. That is not a figure of speech. The Carpos' fanged mouth unhinged, expanding to an unbelievable circumference, and then closed around the cadaver's head and chomped it off in one bite. Oh dear, hope you weren't eating dinner as you read that. In a matter of seconds, the Knossos had been torn to shreds and devoured. Understandably, the other two Noisoi retreated, but the Carpos recrouched and sprang. He landed on the second corpse and proceeded to rip it into plague-flavoured cornflakes. The last spirit dissolved into glittering smoke and tried to fly away, but the peach baby spread his leafy wings and launched himself in pursuit. He opened his mouth and inhaled the sickness, snapping and swallowing until every wisp of smoke was gone. He landed in front of Meg and belched. His green eyes gleamed. He did not appear even slightly sick, which I suppose wasn't surprising, since human diseases don't infect fruit trees. Instead, even after eating 3 whole Noisoi, the little fellow looked hungry. He howled and beat his small chest. Peaches! Slowly, Percy raised his sword. His nose was still red and runny, and his face was puffy. Meg, don't move. He snuffled. I'm gonna... No, she said. Don't hurt him. She put her hand tentatively on the creature's curly head. You saved us, she told the Carpos. Thank you. I started mentally preparing a list of herbal remedies for regenerating severed limbs, but to my surprise, the peach baby did not bite off Meg's hand. Instead, he hugged Meg's leg and glared at us, as if daring us to approach. Peaches, he growled. He likes you, Percy noted. Why? I don't know, Meg said. Honestly, I didn't summon him. I was certain Meg had summoned him, intentionally or unintentionally. I also had some ideas now about her godly parentage and some questions about the guardian that the spirits had mentioned, but I decided it would be better to interrogate her when she did not have a snarling carnivorous toddler wrapped around her leg. Well, whatever the case, I said, we owe the Carpos our lives. This brings to mind an expression I coined ages ago. A peach a day keeps the plague spirits away. Percy sneezed. I thought it was apples and doctors. The Carpos hissed. Or peaches, Percy said. Peaches work too. Peaches, agreed the Carpos. Percy wiped his nose. Not criticising, but why is he grooting? Meg frowned. Grooting? Yeah, like that character in the movie, only saying one thing over and over. I'm afraid I haven't seen that movie, I said, but this Carpos does seem to have a very targeted vocabulary. Maybe Peaches is his name. Meg stroked the Carpos's curly brown hair, which elicited a demonic purring from the creature's throat. That's what I'll call him. Whoa, you are not adopting that! Percy sneezed with such force that another irrigation pipe exploded behind him, sending up a row of tiny geysers. Ugh, sick. You're lucky, I said. Your trick with the water diluted the spirit's power. Instead of getting us deadly illness, you got a head cold. I hate head colds. His green irises looked like they were sinking in a sea of bloodshot. Neither of you got sick? Meg shook her head. I have an excellent constitution, I said. No doubt that's what saved me. And the fact that I hosed the smoke off you, Percy said. Well, yes. Percy stared at me as if waiting for something. After an awkward moment, it occurred to me that if he was a god and I was a worshipper, he might expect gratitude. Thank you, I said. He nodded. No problem. I relaxed a little. If he had demanded a sacrifice like a white bull or a fatted calf, I'm not sure what I would have done. Can we go now? Meg asked. An excellent idea, I said, though I'm afraid Percy is in no condition. I can drive you the rest of the way, he said, if we can get my car out from between those trees. He glanced in that direction and his expression turned even more miserable. Ah, Hades, no! A police cruiser was pulling over on the side of the road. I imagined the officer's eyes tracing the tyre ruts in the mud, which led to the ploughed-down fence and continued the blue Toyota Prius wedged between two peach trees. The cruiser's roof lights flashed on. Great, Percy muttered. If they tow the Prius, I'm dead. My mum and Paul need that car. Go talk to the officers, I said. You won't be any use to us anyway in your current state. Yeah, we'll be fine, Meg said. You said the camp is right over those hills. Right, but, Percy scowled, probably trying to think straight through the effects of his cold. Most people enter camp from the east, where Half-Blood Hill is. The western border is wilder, hills and woods, all heavily enchanted. If you're not careful, you can get lost. He sneezed again. Joe, I'm still not even sure Apollo can get in if he's fully mortal. I'll get in. I tried to exude confidence. I had no alternative. If I was unable to enter Camp Half-Blood. No, I'd already been attacked twice on my first day as a mortal. There was no plan B that would keep me alive. The police car's doors opened. Go, I urged Percy. We'll find our way through the woods. You explain to the police that you're sick and you lost control of the car. They'll be easy on you. Percy laughed. Yeah, cops love me almost as much as teachers do. He glanced at Meg. You sure you're okay with the baby fruit demon? Peaches growled. All good, Meg promised. Go home, rest, get lots of fluids. Percy's mouth twitched. You're telling a son of Poseidon to get lots of fluids. Okay, just try to survive until the weekend, will you? I'll come to camp and check on you guys if I can. Be careful and... Joe! Muttering unhappily, he touched the cap of his pen to his sword, turning it back into a simple ballpoint. A wise precaution before approaching law enforcement. He trudged down the hill, sneezing and sniffling. Officer, he called. Sorry, I'm up here. Can you tell me where Manhattan is? Meg turned to me. Ready? I was soaking wet and shivering. I was having the worst day in the history of days. I was stuck with a scary girl and an even scarier peach baby. I was by no means ready for anything, but I also desperately wanted to reach camp. I might find some friendly faces there, perhaps even jubilant worshippers who would bring me peeled grapes, Oreos, and other holy offerings. Sure, I said. Let's go. Peaches the Carpos grunted. He gestured for us to follow, then scampered towards the hills. Maybe he knew the way. Maybe he just wanted to lead us to a grisly death. Meg skipped after him, swinging from tree branches and cartwheeling through the mud as the mood took her. You might have thought we'd just finished a nice picnic rather than a battle with plague-ridden cadavers. I turned my face to the sky. Are you sure, Zeus? It's not too late to tell me this was an elaborate prank and recall me to Olympus. I've learned my lesson, I promise. The grey winter clouds did not respond. With a sigh, I jogged after Meg and her homicidal new minion. Chapter 9. A walk through the woods, voices driving me bonkers, I hate spaghetti. I sighed with relief. This should be easy. Granted, I'd said the same thing before I'd fought Poseidon in hand-to-hand combat, and that had not turned out to be easy. Nevertheless, our path into Camp Half-Blood looked straightforward enough. For starters, I was pleased I could see the camp, since it was normally shielded from mortal eyes. This boded well for me getting in. From where we stood at the top of the hill, the entire valley spread out below us, roughly 3 square miles of woods, meadows and strawberry fields, bordered by Long Island Sound to the north and rolling hills on the other 3 sides. Just below us, a dense forest of evergreens covered the western third of the vale. Beyond that, the buildings of Camp Half-Blood gleamed in the wintry light. The amphitheatre, the sword-fighting stadium, the open-air dining pavilion with its white marble columns. A trireme floated in the canoe lake. 20 cabins lined the central green, where the communal hearth fire glowed cheerfully. At the edge of the strawberry fields stood the big house, a 4-storey Victorian building painted sky blue with white trim. My friend Chiron would be inside, probably having tea by the fireplace. I would find sanctuary at last. My gaze rose to the far end of the valley. There on the tallest hill, the Athena Parthenos shone in all its gold and alabaster glory. Once, the massive statue had graced the Parthenon in Greece. Now it presided over Camp Half-Blood, protecting the valley from intruders. Even from here I could feel its power, like the subsonic thrum of a mighty engine. Old Grey Eyes was on the lookout for threats, being her usual vigilant, no fun, all business self. Personally, I would have installed a more interesting statue, of myself for instance. Still, the panorama of Camp Half-Blood was an impressive sight. My mood always improved when I saw the place, a small reminder of the good old days when mortals knew how to build temples and do proper burnt sacrifices. Everything was better in ancient Greece. Well, except for a few small improvements modern humans had made, the internet, chocolate croissants, life expectancy. Meg's mouth hung open. How come I've never heard about this place? Do you need tickets? I chuckled. I always enjoyed the chance to enlighten a clueless mortal. You see, Meg, magical borders camouflage the valley. From the outside, most humans would spy nothing here except boring farmland. If they approached, they would get turned around and find themselves wandering out again. Believe me, I tried to get a pizza delivered to camp once. It was quite annoying. You ordered a pizza? Never mind, I said. As for tickets, it's true the camp doesn't let in just anybody, but you're in luck. I know the management. Peaches growled. He sniffed the ground and then chomped a mouthful of dirt and spat it out. He doesn't like the taste of this place, Meg said. Yes, well, I frowned at the Carpos. Perhaps we can find him some potting soil or fertilizer when we arrive. I'll convince the demigods to let him in. But it would be helpful if he doesn't bite their heads off. At least, not right away. Peaches muttered something about peaches. Something doesn't feel right. Meg bit her nails. Those woods. Percy said they would be wild and enchanted and stuff. I too felt as if something was amiss, but I chalked this up to my general dislike of forests, for reasons I'd rather not go into. I find them uncomfortable places. Nevertheless, with our goal in sight, my usual optimism was returning. Don't worry, I assured Meg. You're travelling with a god. Ex-god. I wish you wouldn't keep harping on that. Anyway, the campers are very friendly. They'll welcome us with tears of joy. And wait until you see the orientation video. The what? I directed it myself. Now come along. The woods can't be that bad. The woods were that bad. Soon as we entered their shadows, the trees seemed to crowd us. Trunks closed ranks, blocking old paths and opening new ones. Roots writhed across the forest floor, making an obstacle course of bumps, knots and loops. It was like trying to walk across a giant bowl of spaghetti. The thought of spaghetti made me hungry. It had only been a few hours since Sally Jackson's 7-layer dip and sandwiches, but my mortal stomach was already clenching and squelching for food. The sounds were quite annoying, especially while walking through dark, scary woods. Even the Carpos was starting to smell good to me, giving me visions of peach cobbler and ice cream. As I said earlier, I was generally not a fan of the woods. I tried to convince myself that the trees were not watching me, scowling and whispering among themselves. They were just trees. Even if they had dryad spirits, those dryads couldn't possibly hold me responsible for what had happened thousands of years ago on a different continent. Why not? I asked myself. You still hold yourself responsible? I told myself to stuff a sock in it. We hiked for hours, much longer than it should have taken to reach the big house. Normally, I could navigate by the sun, which shouldn't be a surprise since I spent millennia driving it across the sky, but under the canopy of trees the light was diffuse, the shadows confusing. After we passed the same boulder for the third time, I stopped and admitted the obvious. I have no idea where we are. Meg plopped herself down onto a fallen log. In the green light she looked more like a dryad than ever, though tree spirits do not often wear red sneakers and hand-me-down fleece jackets. Don't you have any wilderness skills? She asked. Reading moss on the sides of trees, following tracks. That's more my sister's thing, I said. Maybe Peaches can help. Meg turned to her Karpos. Hey, can you find us a way out of the woods? For the past few miles the Karpos had been muttering nervously, cutting his eyes from side to side. Now he sniffed the air, his nostrils quivering. He tilted his head. His face flushed bright green. He emitted a distressed bark and then dissolved in a swirl of leaves. Meg shot to her feet. Where did he go? I scanned the woods. I suspected Peaches had done the intelligent thing. He'd sensed danger approaching and abandoned us. I didn't want to suggest that to Meg, though. She'd already become quite fond of the Karpos. Ridiculous getting attached to a small, dangerous creature. Then again, we gods got attached to humans, so I had no room to criticise. Perhaps he went scouting, I suggested. Perhaps we should... Apollo! The voice reverberated in my head, as if someone had installed bass boss speakers behind my eyes. It was not the voice of my conscience. My conscience was not female, and it was not that loud. Yet something about the woman's tone was eerily familiar. What's wrong? Meg asked. The air turned sickly sweet. The trees loomed over me like trigger hairs of a Venus flytrap. A bead of sweat trickled down the side of my face. We can't stay here, I said. Attend me, mortal. Excuse me? Meg said. Come on. We ran, stumbling over tree roots, fleeing blindly through a maze of branches and boulders. We reached a clear stream over a bed of gravel. I barely slowed down. I waded in, sinking shin deep into the ice-cold water. The voice spoke again. Find me. This time it was so loud it stabbed through my forehead like a railroad spike. I stumbled, falling to my knees. Hey! Meg gripped my arm. Get up. You didn't hear that? Hear what? The fall of the sun, the voice boomed. The final verse. I collapsed face first into the stream. Apollo! Meg rolled me over, her face and voice tight with alarm. Come on, I can't carry you. Yet she tried. She dragged me across the river, scolding me and cursing until, with her help, I managed to crawl to shore. I lay on my back, staring wildly at the forest canopy. My soaked clothes were so cold they burned. My body trembled like an open E-string on an electric bass. Meg tugged off my wet winter coat. Her own coat was much too small for me, but she draped the warm, dry fleece over my shoulders. Keep yourself together, she ordered. Don't go crazy on me. My own laughter sounded brittle. But I heard. The fires will consume me. Make haste. The voice splintered into a chorus of angry whispers. Shadows grew longer and darker. Steam rose from my clothes, smelling like the volcanic fumes of Delphi. Part of me wanted to curl into a ball and die. Part of me wanted to get up and run wildly after the voices, to find their source, but I suspected that if I tried, my sanity would be lost forever. Meg was saying something. She shook my shoulders. She put her face nose to nose with mine so that my own derelict reflection stared back at me from the lenses of her cat-eye glasses. She slapped me hard, and I managed to decipher her words. Get up. Somehow I did. Then I doubled over and retched. I hadn't vomited in centuries. I'd forgotten how unpleasant it was. The next thing I knew, we were staggering along, Meg bearing most of my weight. The voices whispered and argued, tearing off little pieces of my mind and carrying them away into the forest. Soon I wouldn't have much left. There was no point. I might as well wander off into the forest and go insane. The idea struck me as funny. I began to giggle. Meg forced me to keep walking. I couldn't understand her words, but her tone was insistent and stubborn, with just enough anger to outweigh her own terror. In my fractured mental state, I thought the trees were parting for us, grudgingly opening a path straight out of the woods. I saw a bonfire in the distance and the open meadows of Camp Half-Blood. It occurred to me that Meg was talking to the trees, telling them to get out of the way. The idea was ridiculous, and at the moment it seemed hilarious. Judging from the steam billowing from my clothes, I guessed I was running a fever of about 106 Fahrenheit. I was laughing hysterically as we stumbled out of the forest, straight towards the campfire where a dozen teenagers sat making s'mores. When they saw us, they rose, in their jeans and winter coats, with assorted weapons at their sides. They were the dourest bunch of marshmallow roasters I had ever seen. I grinned. "Oh, hi, I'm Apollo." My eyes rolled up in my head, and I passed out. Chapter 10. My bus is in flames. My son is older than me. Please, use, make it stop. I dreamed I was driving the sun chariot across the sky. I had the top down in Maserati mode. I was cruising along, honking at jet planes to get out of my way, enjoying the smell of cold stratosphere and bopping to my favourite jam, Alabama Shake's Rise to the Sun. I was thinking about transforming the Spider into a Google self-driving car. I wanted to get out my lute and play a scorching solo that would make Brittany Howard proud. Then a woman appeared in my passenger seat. "You've got to hurry, man." I almost jumped out of the sun. My guest was dressed like a Libyan queen of old. I should know, I dated a few of them. Her gown swirled with red, black and gold floral designs. Her long dark hair was crowned with a tiara that looked like a curved miniature ladder, 2 gold rails lined with rungs of silver. Her face was mature but stately, the way a benevolent queen should look. So, definitely not Hera then. Besides, Hera would never smile at me so kindly. Also, this woman wore a large metal piece symbol around her neck, which did not seem like Hera's style. Still, I felt like I should know her. Despite the elder hippie vibe, she was so attractive that I assumed we must be related. "Who are you?" I asked. Her eyes flashed a dangerous shade of gold, like a feline predator's. "Follow the voices." A lump swelled in my throat. I tried to think straight, but my brain felt like it had been recently run through a Vitamix. "I heard you in the woods. Were you speaking a prophecy?" "Find the gates." She grabbed my wrist. "You've got to find them first. You dig?" "But..." The woman burst into flames. I pulled back my singed wrist and grabbed the wheel as the sun chariot plunged into a nosedive. The Maserati morphed into a school bus, a mode I only used when I had to transport a large number of people. Smoke filled the cabin. Somewhere behind me a nasal voice said, "By all means, find the gates." I glanced in the rearview mirror. Through the smoke I saw a portly man in a mauve suit. He lounged across the back seat where the troublemakers normally sat. Hermes was fond of that seat, but this man was not Hermes. He had a weak jawline, an overlarge nose and a beard that wrapped around his double chin like a helmet strap. His hair was curly and dark like mine, except not a fashionably tousled or luxuriant one. His lip curled as if he smelled something unpleasant. Perhaps it was the burning seats of the bus. "Who are you?" I yelled, desperately trying to pull the chariot out of its dive. "Why are you on my bus?" The man smiled, which made his face even uglier. "My own forefather does not recognize me. I'm hurt." I tried to place him. My cursed mortal brain was too small, too inflexible. It had jettisoned 4,000 years of memories like so much ballast. I don't," I said. "I'm sorry." The man laughed as flames licked at his purple sleeves. "You're not sorry yet, but you will be. Find me the gates, lead me to the oracle. I'll enjoy burning it down." Fire consumed me as the sun chariot careened towards the earth. I gripped the wheel and stared in horror as a massive bronze face loomed outside the windshield. It was the face of the man in purple, fashioned from an expanse of metal larger than my bus. As we hurtled towards it, the features shifted and became my own. Then I woke, shivering and sweating. "Easy." Someone's hand rested on my shoulder. "Don't try to sit up." Naturally, I tried to sit up. My bedside attendant was a young man about my age, my mortal age, with shaggy blonde hair and blue eyes. He wore doctor's scrubs with an open ski jacket, the words Okamo Mountain sketched and stitched on the pocket. His face had a skier's tan. I felt I should know him. I'd been having that sensation a lot since my fall from Olympus. I was lying on a camp bed in the middle of a cabin. On either side, bunk beds lined the walls. Rough cedar beams ribbed the ceiling. The white plaster walls were bare except for a few hooks for coats and weapons. It could have been a modest abode in almost any age. Ancient Athens, medieval France, the farmlands of Iowa. It smelled of clean linen and dried sage. The only decorations were some flower pots on the windowsill, where cheerful yellow blooms were thriving despite the cold weather outside. Those flowers. My voice was hoarse, as if I'd inhaled the smoke from my dream. "Those are from Delos, my sacred island." "Yup," said the young man. "They only grow in and around cabin 7. Your cabin. Do you know who I am? I studied his face, the calmness of his eyes, the smile resting easily on his lips, the way his hair curled around his ears. I had a vague memory of a woman, an alt-country singer named Naomi Solis, whom I'd met in Austin. I blushed, thinking about her even now. To my teenage self, our romance felt like something I'd watched in a movie a long time ago, a movie my parents wouldn't have allowed me to see. But this boy was definitely Naomi's son, which meant he was my son too, which felt very, very strange. You're Will Solis, I said. Yeah, Will agreed. It's awkward. My frontal lobe did a 180 inside my skull. I listed sideways. Whoa there. Will steadied me. I tried to heal you, but honestly, I don't understand what's wrong. You've got blood, not ichor. You're recovering from your injuries, but your vital signs are completely human. Don't remind me. Yeah, well, he put his hand on my forehead and frowned in concentration. His fingers trembled slightly. I don't know any of that until I tried to give you nectar. Your lips started streaming. I almost killed you. Ah, I ran my tongue across my bottom lip, which felt heavy and numb. I wondered if that explained my dream about smoke and fire. I hoped so. I guess Meg forgot to tell you about my condition. I guess she did. Will took my wrist and checked my pulse. You seem to be about my age, 15 or so. Your heart rate is back to normal. Ribs are mending. Nose is swollen but not broken. And I have acne, I lamented. And flab. Will tilted his head. You're mortal, and that's what you're worried about. You're right, I'm powerless, weaker even than you puny demigods. Gee, thanks. I got the feeling that he almost said dad, but managed to stop himself. It was difficult to think of this young man as my son. He was so poised, so unassuming, so free of acne. He also didn't appear to be awestruck in my presence. In fact, the corner of his mouth had started twitching. Are you amused? I demanded. Will shrugged. Well, it's either find this funny or freak out. My dad, the god Apollo, is a 15-year-old. 16? I corrected. Let's go with 16. A 16-year-old mortal lying on a bed in my cabin, and with all my healing arts, which I got from you, I still can't figure out how to fix you. There is no fixing this, I said miserably. I am cast out of Olympus. My fate is tied to a girl named Meg. It could not be worse. Will laughed, which I thought took a great deal of gall. Meg seems cool. She's already poked Connor Stoll in the eyes and kicked Sherman Yang in the crotch. She did what? She'll get along just fine here. She's waiting for you outside, along with most of the campers. Will's smile faded. Just so you're prepared, they're asking a lot of questions. Everybody is wondering if your arrival, your mortal situation, has anything to do with what's been going on at camp. I frowned. What has been going on at camp? The cabin door opened. 2 more demigods stepped inside. One was a tall boy of about 13, his skin burnished bronze and his cornrows woven like DNA helixes. His black wool peacoat and black jeans. He looked as if he'd stepped from the deck of an 18th century whaling vessel. The other newcomer was a younger girl in olive camouflage. She had a full quiver on her shoulder, and her short ginger hair was dyed with a shock of bright green, which seemed to defeat the point of wearing camouflage. I smiled, delighted that I actually remembered their names. Austin, I said. And Kayla, isn't it? Rather than falling to their knees and blubbering gratefully, they gave each other a nervous glance. So, it's really you, Kayla said. Austin frowned. Meg told us you were beaten up by a couple of thugs. She said you had no powers and you went hysterical out in the woods. My mouth tasted like burnt school bus upholstery. Meg talks too much. But you're mortal, Kayla asked. As in completely mortal. Does that mean I'm going to lose my archery skills? I can't even qualify for the Olympics until I'm 16. And if I lose my music? Austin shook his head. No, man, that's wrong. My last video got like 500,000 views in a week. What am I supposed to do? It warmed my heart that my children had the right priorities, their skills, their images, their views on YouTube. Say what you will about gods being absentee parents, our children inherit many of our finest personality traits. My problems should not affect you, I promised. If Zeus went around retroactively yanking my divine power out of all my descendants, half the medical schools in the country would be empty. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame would disappear. The tarot card reading industry would collapse overnight. Austin's shoulders relaxed. That's a relief. So if you die while you're mortal, Kayla said, we won't disappear. Guys, Will interrupted. Why don't you run to the big house and tell Kyron that our patient is conscious? I'll bring him along in a minute, and see if you can disperse the crowd outside, okay? I don't want everybody rushing Apollo at once." Kayla and Austin nodded sagely. As my children, they no doubt understood the importance of controlling the paparazzi. As soon as they were gone, Will gave me an apologetic smile. "They're in shock. We all are. It'll take some time to get used to, whatever this is." "You do not seem shocked," I said. Will laughed under his breath. "I'm terrified, but one thing you learn as head counsellor, you have to keep it together for everyone else. Let's get you on your feet." It was not easy. I fell twice. My head spun and my eyes felt as if they were being microwaved in their sockets. Recent dreams continued to churn in my brain like river silt, muddying my thoughts. The woman with the crown and the peace symbol, the man in the purple suit. "Lead me to the oracle. I'll enjoy burning it down." The cabin began to feel stifling. I was anxious to get some fresh air. One thing my sister Artemis and I agree on: every worthwhile pursuit is better outdoors than indoors. Music is best played under the dome of heaven. Poetry should be shared in the agora. Archery is definitely easier outside, as I can attest to after one time I tried target practice in my father's throne room. And driving the sun, well, that's not really an indoor sport either. Leaning on Will for support, I stepped outside. Kayla and Austin had succeeded in shooting the crowd away. The only one waiting for me, oh joy and happiness, was my young overlord Meg, who had apparently now gained fame at camp as Crotch Kicker McCaffrey. She still wore Sally Jackson's hand-me-down green dress, though it was a bit dirtier now. Her leggings were ripped and torn. On her bicep, a line of butterfly bandages closed a nasty cut she must have got in the woods. She took one look at me, scrunched up her face and stuck out her tongue. "You look yuck." "And you, Meg," I said, "are as charming as ever." She adjusted her glasses until they were just crooked enough to be annoying. "Thought you were going to die." "Glad to disappoint you." "Nah," she shrugged. "You still owe me a year of service. We're bound, whether you like it or not." I sighed. It was ever so wonderful to be back in Meg's company. I suppose I should thank you. I had a hazy memory of my delirium in the forest, Meg carrying me along, the trees seeming to part before us. "How did you get us out of the woods?" Her expression turned guarded. "Dunno. Luck?" She jabbed her thumb at Will Solis. "From what he's been telling me, it's a good thing we got out before nightfall." "Why?" Will started to answer, then apparently thought better of it. "I shall let Kyron explain. Come on." I rarely visited Camp Half-Blood in winter. The last time had been 3 years ago, when a girl named Thalia Grace crash-landed my bus in the Canoe Lake. I expected the camp to be sparsely populated. I knew most demigods only came for the summer, leaving a small core of year-rounders during the school term, those who, for various reasons, found camp the only safe place they could live. Still, I was struck by how many demigods I saw. If Cabin 7 was my indication, each god's cabin could hold beds of about 20 campers. That meant a maximum capacity of 400 demigods, enough for several phalanxes or one really amazing yacht party. Yet, as we walked across camp, I saw no more than a dozen people. In the fading light of sunset, a lone girl was scaling the climbing wall as lava flowed down either side. At the lake, a crew of 3 checked the rigging on the trireme. Some campers had found reasons to be outside just so they could gawk at me. Over by the hearth, one young man sat polishing his shield, watching me in its reflective surface. Another fellow glared at me as he spliced barbed wire outside the Ares cabin. From the awkward way he walked, I assumed he was Sherman Yang of the recently kicked crotch. In the doorway of the Hermes cabin, 2 girls giggled and whispered as I passed. Normally this sort of attention wouldn't have fazed me. My magnetism was understandably irresistible, but now my face burned. Me, the manly paragon of romance, reduced to a gawky, inexperienced boy. I would have screamed at the heavens for this unfairness, but that would have been super embarrassing. We made our way through the yellowy strawberry fields. Up on Half-Blood Hill, the golden fleece glinted in the lowest branch of a tall pine tree. Whiffs of steam rose from the head of Peleus, the guardian dragon coiled around the base of the trunk. Next to the tree, the Athena Parthenos looked angry red in the sunset. Or perhaps she just wasn't happy to see me. Athena had never got over our little tiff during the Trojan War. Halfway down the hillside, I spotted the Oracle's cave, its entrance shrouded by thick burgundy curtains. The torches on either side stood unlit, usually a sign that my prophetess, Rachel Dare, was not in residence. I wasn't sure whether to be disappointed or relieved. Even when she was not channeling prophecies, Rachel was a wise young lady. I had hoped to consult her about my problems. On the other hand, since her prophetic power had apparently stopped working, which I suppose in some small part was my fault, I wasn't sure Rachel would want to see me. She would expect explanations from her main man, and while I had invented mansplaining and and what was its foremost practitioner, I had no answers to give her. The dream of the flaming bus stayed with me, the groovy crowned woman urging me to find the gates, the ugly mauve-suited man threatening to burn the oracle. Well, the cave was right there. I wasn't sure why the woman in the crown was having such trouble finding it, or why the ugly man would be so intent on burning its gates, which amounted to nothing more than purple curtains, unless the dream was referring to something other than the Oracle of Delphi. I rubbed my throbbing temples. I kept reaching for memories that weren't there, trying to plunge into my vast lake of knowledge only to find it had been reduced to a kiddie pool. You simply can't do much with a kiddie pool brain. On the porch of the big house, a dark-haired young man was waiting for us. He wore faded black trousers, a Ramones t-shirt, bonus points for musical taste, and a black leather bomber jacket. At his side hung a Stygian iron sword. "I remember you," I said. "Is it Nicholas, son of Hades?" "Nico D'Angelo. He studied me, his eyes sharp and colourless, like broken glass. So it's true, you're completely mortal. There's an aura of death around you, a thick possibility of death." Meg snorted. "Sounds like a weather forecast." I did not find this amusing, being face to face with a son of Hades. I recalled the many mortals I had sent to the underworld with my plague arrows. It had always seemed like a good, clean fun, meting out richly deserved punishments for wicked deeds. Now I began to understand the terror in my victim's eyes. I did not want an aura of death hanging over me. I definitely did not want to stand in judgment before Nico D'Angelo's father. Will put his hand on Nico's shoulder. "Nico, we need to have another talk about your people skills." "Hey, I'm just stating the obvious. If this is Apollo and he dies, we're all in trouble." Will turned to me. "I apologise for my boyfriend." Nico rolled his eyes. "Could you not? Would you prefer special guy?" Will asked. "Or significant other?" "Significant annoyance in your case," Nico grumbled. "Oh, I'll get you for that." Meg wiped her dripping nose. "You guys fight a lot. I thought you were going to see a centaur." And here I am. The screen door opened. Chiron trotted out, ducking his head to avoid the doorframe. From the waist up, he looked every bit the professor he often pretended to be in the mortal world. His brown wool jacket had patches on the elbows. His smart plaid shirt did not quite match his green tie. His beard was neatly trimmed, but his hair would have failed the tidiness inspection required for a proper rat's test. From the waist down, he was a white stallion. My old friend smiled, though his eyes were stormy and distracted. "Apollo, it's good you are here. We need to talk about the disappearances."